Welcome back to Celebrity Radio. It's Alex Belfield talking to some of the world's biggest stars and some of my favourite people too. And we've got one for you today. The Wright Stuff is my breakfast show. I wake up at just after 10 and he's on every morning bringing us the news and interesting guests and bringing a sense of humour to it, which is the most brilliant thing about that Channel 5 show. And I'm delighted to say they're moving up to Manchester next week for some specials. And Matthew joins us on the show now. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you, Raj. What a lovely introduction. Thank you for that.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it? When you have a career that lasts a year, you think you've done well. 2 years, not bad. 3 years, extraordinary. I mean, how long have you been doing that show for now?
16 years and 2 months.
Incredible. Not that you're counting.
16 years. And it's quite funny, as you just alluded to it, the first day, at the end of the show, I thought, blimey, I'll be lucky if I don't get fired because I was rubbish. At the end of the first week, I thought, oh, God, they're never going to want me back another week. And then you go from weeks into months, months into 6 months, 6 months to the end of the first year. The end of the first year, well, I literally was thinking about packing up my stuff. We were in Norfolk at the time. That's where the show started. And I thought, oh, might as well move back to London. I'm done for. And now you got another deal, and then another deal, and then another deal. And then the show started to sort of find its audience and grow. And now I think we're part of the furniture at Channel 5.
It's extraordinary. Do you feel like this is the perfect place for you to be on TV? It seems like it ticks all your boxes. You can be a bit confrontational and controversial, but at the same time you can be funny and take the piss.
That's it in a nutshell. Do you want to do my PR? The show, I think, oh dear. My personal aim is to try to be as honest with the viewers as I would with my wife or my friends. And people, especially the bigger guests who might do bigger shows, invariably will say at the end of the programme, my God, you really are exactly the same on air as you are off. And that is like the sort of highest praise for me personally, because I don't want to be a television presenter. I don't really like television presenters, smiley, plastic surgery, whatever. It just doesn't interest me. But I love conversation. And I was born for the show because I was brought up in a slightly dysfunctional family, in as much as my dad was a sort of pro-Thatcherite, despite the fact he lost his job in the 80s and ended up virtually destitute. But my mum has always been fairly left of centre. And my childhood was, all I can remember is my mum and dad. It was arguing. You hear the word arguing, it has so many negative connections to it, but actually in my family they were just respectful discussions, but my mum and dad didn't really agree on anything. And people say to me, oh, you're really opinionated, Wrighty. And I often take a step back, because when I think it through, I'm not sure I have any opinions at all, because every time someone puts up an argument, I can always find at least one counter-argument. And that includes my own views. I say, oh, maybe I think this. And you think, no, I don't. I was a vegetarian. Meat is murder. I did 11 years. And then I thought, this is just a nonsense. And I started unpicking it, and I started eating meat. I don't know if I have any opinions at all.
Yeah. Do you know why I love you? Is because I think we do the same job, in a sense that show that you do on the TV could be a radio show. It's got that feel of a live phone-in. It's the same sort of thing, isn't it?
You're very perceptive, because when we were drawing up the plans for the show, initially just trying to work out how we were going to do it, we were going to copy the notion. I think her name was Roz. In Frasier, it's the radio show, isn't it? Psychologists on the radio. And Roz, I think, is the Brit in the booth. And that's where the notion of the girl in the booth taking the calls came from. Right. And when the show first started, the woman in that job did it in a Perspex booth, just like on Frasier. So we copied a fictional radio show.
Wow.
So you're top marks. It is a radio. It's a phone-in show on the radio.
It is.
And I try and liven it up as best we can visually, but it is fundamentally, just as you said, a show like yours.
And give me a second to explain myself before you jump down my throat, but I spent 15 years in local radio and at the BBC and grew to hate journalists because they're such sanctimonious pricks. I find them despicable. You try not to be that deliberately, don't you? Because there's nothing worse than watching someone who thinks they're above everyone else. That's not appealing, especially at 10 o'clock on Channel 5.
I did 15 years in print, just over 10 on the Nationals, the Sun, Today and the Mirror. And I left newspapers for a number of reasons, but one of which was I didn't like what I was doing. I didn't like what the papers were doing. And so, again, I think you're being quite perceptive, because if I'm not going to be I think when I was a tabloid print journalist, I was originally an actor, and I think I became the character of a tabloid print journalist. And eventually it became a full-time job, pretending to be a hard-bitten, foot-in-the-door, mean-spirited hack. And I'm just not like that. And leaving the show, I've mentioned it before on air, but I did go into therapy. My marriage broke down. I've been drinking too much. I went into counselling and started to recognise some of the mistakes I'd made in my own life while I was on the newspapers, and sort of got a chance to start again. And this time, be true to myself.
I think to do what you do well, you've got to have a certain peace within you, because if not, you just take it all home. And I see that a lot. It's sad, isn't it? Because it is, at the end of the day, a job, and the world keeps spinning no matter how awful the news is.
It does. Yes, it does. And I'm very good at, I have to work at home. I have to watch a lot of news at home to keep up to speed, do a lot of research online. I do hours and hours and hours of news consumption. I read what people are saying, and the big high-profile Twitter people and that. And I do find a lot of it really, annoying is being rather polite. I find some of it absolutely sickening, really. And that how, when there are still people alive today that lived through World War II, we can be moving in the direction of a sort of hate-driven society, pitching one deprived side against another deprived side, while the rich get richer. It sticks in my craw, really, and so I do. If I can help in any shape or form make the world a better, more understanding place instead of a more hateful place, then that's what I would like to do.
Hasn't there been a change, though, since you started on the air? I started back in about the same time in radio 15 years ago, and you look at the world. Yesterday I switched on Loose Women, and they'd got a girl on who I'd never heard of, who had farted, who thought she was going into labour, but she wasn't, and they made 20 minutes out of that. And then last night I went to see the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra with Elvis, and the guy behind me was singing at the top of his lungs as if it was karaoke, and I said, "Can you stop?" And he replied, "I've paid for my ticket, so I'll do what I want." And I thought, the world has changed. There's no class anymore, really.
BBC News at 6, their lead item was trying to suggest that Donald Trump wants Nigel Farage to be Britain's ambassador in the United States. They show the tweet in which Donald Trump doesn't say anything of the sort. He says some people think he would do a good job. And they did an 8 minutes discussion on should Nigel Farage be the ambassador. Nigel Farage can't even get elected to the House of Commons. It's absolute nonsense. And I do worry about our BBC in particular, but also the big news organisations. What agenda are they following? Because it doesn't seem to have anything to do with reality or the people who are paying their bills.
When I used to work with those left-footing producers, of which I had 7 at one point for my mid-morning show, I used to try and tell them that they're as bigoted in the opposite direction of the people that they're accusing of being bigoted, and they never quite got it. But that has happened with news, hasn't it? That the people screaming the loudest are just as prejudiced, but on the other side.
I think that's exactly where we've got to. I never gave my opinion on the EU referendum because my problem was, why are we having a referendum at all? The Germans banned referendum after the Second World War because they could see how the Nazis used them to manipulate the German people into war, and they learnt their lesson. It does seem peculiar, doesn't it, that when we came to having a vote on, essentially the argument was, should we change our voting system to proportional representation? By the time the question was put on the referendum voting paper, it was so complicated, AV2, I didn't really even understand what I was voting for at the time. And yet, that was a very simple issue. Do we want proportional representation? The question of leaving the European Union is so enormous, it almost defies comprehension. But the question put to the voters is, do you want to leave the European Union? You might have thought that the question might be slightly more demanding and challenging than something as simple as that, when the consequences are so vast.
And I always tell London people, it's okay you demanding democracy, but that means that stupid people, as you see it in the North, have a vote too, which will counteract your vote. So just remember that.
I don't think there are stupid people in the North and stupid people in the Palace of Westminster on the banks of the Thames, and they're collecting a nice salary at all of our expense.
You see, I love that you do that daily. You do point out this stuff that we seem to skip by. And as I say, it's hard to know who to trust. And I have sympathy with the public because when they read something or they see it on BBC News, they presume it's been thought through and true. But they forget that it has an agenda in the same way Sky News and Fox News do.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I even though I've been in news all my life, I never felt it as strongly as I did last night watching this Farage stuff because I think we made maybe a 20-second reference to it on our paper review 12 hours earlier, or nearly 12 hours earlier. How it could be the lead item on BBC News at 6, I just do not know, unless there is an agenda.
Are you still excited when you walk in that studio and the live sign goes on and you know that you're talking to the nation and basically you've got a fill, and if you fall apart, the show falls apart?
I'm excited rather than shitting myself. So in the early days, I would have been shitting myself. It's really interesting that if I go and, I do school prize givings, I do a lot of charity stuff, and as soon as I'm out of my usual studio, my comfort zone, the audience and the crew, I get incredibly nervous and do start to shit myself. So Manchester, going up to Manchester, I've got some of my northern friends are coming along to give me a bit of moral support, but the feeling of being in the cricket ground, Old Trafford cricket ground, the Emirates ground, is going to make me more nervous. That I will not deny. But, that keeps you on your edge and makes it exciting. I
got to tell you, in all the years I've done phone-ins, the best audiences I've ever found for phone-in is the Northwest. There's something about people from Oldham and Manchester. They've got spirit.
Very good humour.
Yeah.
Very good humour. I have lots of friends in London, but really my very best friends are in the North.
Yeah, it's the sarcasm as well, isn't it? It's that sort of Peter Kay element in real life. I mean, he is in every pub.
I was just thinking my friend Julia is coming, nickname is Ratty, and we met when she took the piss out of me at a festival, shouting abuse at me, and I was really upset. I said, why can't these people just leave me alone? And actually, she was so sarcastic, I started laughing as I was walking away from her. And in the end, I turned around and we went and had a drink, and we've never looked back. We're best mates.
Oh, I love that. Just about you, we got to know you a little bit on I'm a Celebrity, which was so joyous because it was seeing you out of your comfort zone of that studio where you're in control. Do you like being you in that? I mean, was that a good thing for you? I know it was tough because they make it tough. Do you look back now at that as something you'd do again and that you enjoy?
I loved my time with most of the people I was in the jungle with, and I've made friendships for life. I see Steve Davis regularly. I speak to Rebecca Adlington, Lucy Pargeter, David Emmanuel, all fairly regularly. We're in contact, which ain't bad. I got to go to Australia. Once I got kicked out, I rented a Harley Davidson, went down to Byron Bay, slept on the beach, had the most amazing time. What spoils it is watching how producers edit the show to make some people look good and others look bad. The Joey Amy romance was just a lie. I mean, it just wasn't one. And all of us in the jungle, there was almost a sort of some kind of unstated pressure that we weren't going to contradict the invented narrative. But actually, I really resent being part of a lie, so I don't make no bones about it. It's a lie. That romance never happened. They never went out with each other, despite their autobiographies saying they did. They didn't. And what I'm seeing at the moment, who's bullying who? They tried doing this in my year. Lucy from Emmerdale was a bully. Lucy is one of the nicest people I've ever met, who busted her back for everybody there. I'm very distrustful of the bullying storylines. I'm very distrustful about a lot of what we see now. It's kind of being in I'm a Celebrity, even though I loved it and I'd go back and do it in an instant, as a viewer, I've been left quite jaded by it. Yeah.
It's interesting. I went to see a mate of mine in Chicago, the musical, the other week, and when they sing that song, Razzle Dazzle 'em and they'll make you a star, it's come true, hasn't it, where you can PR your way into and out of anything.
Completely, but then easy come, easy go, it tends to be the downside.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I've got to let you go. I'd talk to you all day. I've loved chatting. You've got an amazing show, and keep on keeping on, because we need somebody like you to talk through the bullshit and make us see a little bit more clearly, and if not clearly, just another side and another perspective, because we've become so this point or that point and nothing in the middle, and that's what we really need, especially at this time post-Brexit and Trump.
I'm not intending to blow smoke, but it's comments like that get me up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work. Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much.
The Right Stuff continues on Channel 5 every single day. Thank you for being my breakfast show, and we love you very much. Matthew Wright, great to talk to you.
My pleasure.